So part of what this presentation is based on a little bit is doing agritourism. There's sort of this bizarre irony for me in that the folks at URAC who've helped sponsor the conference and did the conference in Italy several years ago, just coincidentally, that's where I went as a college student in 1983, ended up farming there in the South Tyrol region for a total of about 4 years, lead study tours going back there, and have just been focused on agritourism as one of the viability pieces that I think we need to learn more from that region of the South Tyrol, Alto Adige. There are a lot of lessons there. And so what I've been doing over the years is setting up semester-long programs for undergraduates, setting up study tours for graduate students, and recently working with my friend Sharon Palmer, who's there in the hat. And so we've been doing these study tours for registered dietitians who want to understand, everything from sustainable diets going all the way back to the time of the Iceman 5,300 years ago, and kind of, how those foodways have evolved over time, but also how farming has transformed there in the South Tyrol region over the years. So some of this is based on that, and I'm happy to stop at any point to answer any questions, and really do want this to be a generative discussion. So, part of what we'll do here in the last half or so is actually ask for some brainstorming from you all, see where you're at, things that you're interested in, and then we'll see where we take it from there. Any questions so far? Okay, great. This click works. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right, so before we go too far, I'd just love to do a quick show of hands if we could, to see in terms of what the tools people may be using already. We'll just go through these quickly. Zoom, how many folks are using Zoom? And this was a different question pre-COVID. Google Drive. Okay, we're close there. Facebook, Instagram. Okay, LinkedIn. All right, WhatsApp. Couple. Slack. Yeah, that's interesting. Story maps of any kind. So one, okay, good. Thinkific, somebody use Thinkific? We'll dive into that a little bit. No, Teachable. Oh. Moodle, Google Classroom. All right, Blackboard, Canvas, D2L, Brightspace, LearnWorlds, it's a little bit newer. Kajabi, Mighty Networks, Circle, LearnDash, which is a plugin for websites for course. Okay, that gives me a good sense of kind of where we are. Others you use that you might want to just quickly mention here. Yep.
Would you include Squarespace?
Sure, websites, sure, yep.
What about like plant identification?
Okay, good. That's one I haven't thought of. Excellent, great.
Yeah, put TikTok out there.
TikTok, yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yep, TikTok, YouTube. Yes, sir.
CRMs, event management.
Great, absolutely. CRMs. Any others? All right. Well, obviously, we're not going to hit everything here, but we'll try to do some brainstorming and maybe open up some ideas and things here that might be a little bit different for you. Oops. Now, if we could get things to go in the right direction. So, I'm a big fan of really trying to bookend agritourism experiences. I mean, particularly in this era when we're thinking about climate change, we're thinking about what it costs in terms of climate and all of the issues that agritourism kind of has associated with it. We're trying to do the right thing, but we really need to make sure that we also maximize the educational value, educational experience of these. And so one of the things that I really like doing is trying to find a way to provide information to people before they actually go somewhere and engage in some sort of an agritourism experience. In this case, talking, one of the things that I really like doing is setting up the study tours, as soon as someone is registered and has paid the deposit, then they actually get access to the information that I'd like them to read and start reviewing before they go. Because if you do that, if you go ahead and front load things, then you increase, sort of the literacy of the conversations, you level the playing field a bit in terms of how people are going to step into that experience, so that they're already coming in, you don't have to do quite as much in terms of sort of the orientation period and giving background knowledge. And I find, people who are serious about their agritourism experiences really like to dive in. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how I do that. And then finally, I think friend of mine talks, Douglas Gayton talks about, information waste being the same as food waste in some ways. We invest all of this energy and time into providing people with resources. And then if we're not careful, then we don't really maximize that experience. And we need to make sure that when we have an agritourism experience, that it's shared as broadly as possible and that people internalize as much as they can going through that process. And so I'll give you an example of some of the things that I've tried. This is usually on a 10-day study tour going to the South Tyrol region of Italy. And so I am not suggesting you do all of these things at once. These are things I've tried at different points in time. I think part of what we have to recognize is sort of figure out where that audience is, and what they're going to be most familiar with in terms of the online tools they might be using. There's nothing wrong with introducing them to something that's new, but you don't want to overdo that, which as a tinkerer and someone who likes to just try different things in education, I have overwhelmed people at different times by trying different things. But one of the things that I've done is with the syllabus. I mean, I think educators were terrible about making syllabi, pretty. They should be compelling. They shouldn't just be a Microsoft Word document. And so when you do that, then there are ways to go ahead and create a flip book. I put this one on Flip Snack, so that people got access to it. I use it for promotion as well. So that people can go to the Flip Snack, to my own personal site. They can see the syllabi or the study tours that I've got, at a given point in time, and they can actually see it. They can share it. They can get it around. So, if you take that bit of time, and obviously websites and other things matter, but people really do appreciate having these PDFs in fairly creative formats, and gives you the chance to get the word out if you need to do that. Another way that, another tool that you should incorporate or should think about incorporating, before the tour as an exercise during the tour, something that you do to summarize the tour at the end, are using story maps. How many folks are familiar with kind of story maps? So a little bit. They're all the kinds of story map tools that are out there. Some of them are free. There's even one now, which this is a new version of story maps that's come out. And when you feel free to use your phones or any devices you've got here to look things up as we're going along. Actually, I just got about a $200 subscription for story maps for free last week. And it's one of the nicest, cleanest. So basically what you're doing, for example, if you have a study tour, or if you have people that are going to come to your farm and you're going to go to other farms there in the region, or you want to showcase the products and where you're selling them or where they're coming from for value-added products, you're creating for each of these sites. It can be a photo, it can be a video, it can be text that starts to describe that, so that, and then it's embedded on a map if you want to do that. So people actually can follow that tour kind of chronologically and geographically, either before you do the tour. I've had students, graduate students, build these story maps as we work all together, so that they're creating their own version of a story map documentation of what we've done. And a friend of mine did that with a study tour that she did to Kyrgyzstan. It was just incredibly powerful. So, information waste, don't lose it. We have all these devices that are so much fun to use. And so you can be really preemptive in that. I put Google Drive here for a reason, because that can be an incredibly useful tool. I've got, for the study tours that I do in Italy, I've got a spreadsheet in Google Sheets that people can add to, where I've got about 75 different readings, about 15 or 20 different videos, things I want them to actually look at or at least scan before the tour, or at least have access to. And then I very often use a folder where I've got all sorts of research articles and other things that people have access to. So, and those are hot linked between the Google Sheets and another folder so that I can actually give them access to these, to these documents or videos. And, it basically, I give them about a month's worth of work, before they're on site in order to dive in and be culturally literate, at least to some degree. It makes it all much more beneficial. Another tool that I've used that is, it's changed its name. Part of what you're trying to do, I think, is set up a certain chemistry also among the group, if you're working with a group. And so Flip is the new version that Microsoft has done. I haven't used it yet. It's very new. I've used other versions. And basically what it is, it's a video platform. Flipgrid is the old one, where I would have each person come onto Flipgrid on their phones or whatever device they're using. They do an introductory 90 second to 2-minute video of who they are, because a lot of times we're bringing these people together from places where they never would have met. So basically, by the time the tour or the event, the activity starts, everybody has had a chance to sort of see the other people. People have had a chance to kind of give their own story, and that starts to build this chemistry in order to start moving people forward, because a lot of it is that kind of organic nature of the group that you're trying to build at the outset. So there are different ways to do that, and can be really helpful. Now that everybody is so acclimated to Zoom, certainly that works really well. Having sessions where you bring everybody together on a live session, have the recording there and available, so that if they weren't able to attend a session, with Zoom very often, I mean, we take it a few steps further, and people gotten, hyper creative in the COVID world now, where we would do wine tastings, we would do various food tastings. In a couple of cases, people even, baked food and brought it to the events. And of course, they're the only ones that get to eat it, but at least they get to share the recipe and do these other things. So again, it's trying to sort of either beforehand, trying to get people to work together, or afterwards, to debrief and stay connected. And then WhatsApp, actually, I think a lot of other cultures do a better job than American culture in terms of using WhatsApp and getting super creative about that. One of the things that I do with the study tours is go ahead and get everybody on WhatsApp together. That's for the logistics, just to being able to manage everybody. And if you're meeting in one given place and the logistics are fairly complicated, obviously having a WhatsApp group, can be extremely beneficial in pulling people together. And even if you don't want to do some of this other stuff, sharing some of the resources you want people to take a look at, or giving them the ability to share resources that they found about what it is they're about to dive into and explore. And then this is the one that we'll dive into for a few moments. It seems like folks don't have as much experience here. In the education world, it's called LMS, the learning management system, and there are all kinds of learning management systems out there, and don't let that dull and dry language scare you away, because I think this is one of the most underutilized resources in agritourism, where we really can expand a lot of the impact that we have in terms of education. And some of those can be incredibly expensive. Institutions pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for these. You can use your first one in a lot of cases. You can use it and build it for free. And then you can kind of tinker with it, expand, and we'll dive into that in just a minute. And then also, just working with different groups. Obviously, LinkedIn helps build some of that shared knowledge, certainly does a great job in helping to push forward some of the agritourism activities that you've got, and obviously Facebook and Instagram. I do want to point out here, one of the things I've learned over the years of doing the online education is trying to figure out where that middle threshold is in terms of comfort for people. And obviously some people don't want to use Facebook. There's some of that you run into. So that's not really where you want to do all this. Some folks haven't done or not going to do LinkedIn. So, part of what you need to think about is, are you going to create your own environment where people feel fairly safe, that's sort of native, to the topic that you've got? And that's where I think some of these learning management systems can give you some advantage there. So before I jump, I'll see if are there any questions so far? Yes.
On the chat, would you be willing to share your slides with us at some point after this?
Yes, in fact, I think, are they? Absolutely. And they're all?
Yeah, it would just be really helpful to have them in PDF format if they
Yeah,
could.
we'll make sure, yeah, and we'll make sure you have a PDF version.
All
So
right.
I'll convert that. and drop
That
it
way
in.
we don't have to keep trying to take pictures of all of them.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, yeah, absolutely. Totally appreciate that. Great. Any other questions? Jump here. All right. So again, I don't want to make this dry, but just to give you a little bit of a sense, when you're looking at an e-learning platform, these are the things that you typically will run into. How many folks have done an online course of some sort? All right, so the numbers are starting to jump up from where they were a couple of years ago for sure. So, they're the introductory elements where you're trying to present yourself, you're trying to tell the story of what it is you're doing, giving the overview. One of the things that I really like is you're basically creating this resource library for people that's accessible all the way throughout. And ideally, hopefully you'll be able to provide that for them. A lot of cases you want to say you have access to this for the next 3 months, the next 6 months, the next year. The learning modules, which I'll hopefully be able to show you here in just a moment. The reason I point out synchronous or asynchronous, in this kind of a format, you can have everyone do everything on their own time as they wish. You can have everyone join in together at designated times. You can do a combination of that and hybridize it. There are all sorts of ways of doing that. And you as an instructor or someone who's overseeing this platform can also track all of this and see how people are doing over time in terms of progressing through the material. You can create these moderated discussion forums, which are awesome, especially before the experience and after the experience, where you're starting to build the dialogue, build the ideas, get a sense of their questions, where they're coming in. And those forums can be everything from people doing introductions and you responding to giving them content to respond to or assignments. The discussions in the chats, that varies a lot between the kind of learning management system that you might use, but obviously you're trying to create this rapport between the quote unquote instructor or facilitator and the participants. And then also some of them do a good job and some don't in terms of letting those participants message back and forth between each other, again, in that confined environment that you've created. And then finally, this community, which I'll talk about in a little more detail. Ideally, if you start to build this to the point where you've created several courses, you want that whole community of people who are engaged in all of the courses, you want to give them the capacity to actually come together and mingle. And in some cases, if you're trying to build an agritourism business and you want people to do one experience and then you want them to do another, that's also a way of helping kind of build that. So there's a marketing piece that can be really compelling in that as well. And then if you're getting more formal and you want to do things where you're using a drop system, by giving people assignments that can be informal assignments. One of the things that's always great to do in these platforms is give people the chance to, profile, their own kind of agricultural context or where they're coming from or their own food ways and trying to find ways to set that up. There's also, if you're into the testing and tracking completion, you can do that. And whatever you do, make sure you choose a platform that's mobile friendly. That really matters in the long run. And any questions on that? A little bit more here. So we'll see if this link works. To go to Thinkific. Maybe we'll get lucky. So, as we're doing this, what I'd say, I'm not promoting any particular product. You have to figure out what it is that's going to work for you. So this is Thinkific. You can start for free. You can do one course and just start for free. And this is something where literally you can log in. You're giving away your email address. That's not all you're giving away at the very beginning. Oops, sorry. And so you're giving away your email address. And within 10 minutes, you're set up to start building a course. And it's not something anybody's going to see. You can just do it in a non-threatening way and figure it out, I think, very, very quickly as you're moving along. I mean, basically, if you've got some good educational instincts and you're thinking about how you're going to break things down into modules, then you can set up the structure of a course. If you've been thinking about it a little bit, you can set up the basic structure, not all the resources, but in half an hour or an hour. Yes, sir.
Is this overkill or like we operate
I'm sorry, just your opinion. Is this overkill example? Like we operate a small farm, we have
Yeah.
interns coming in every year. So we can develop like an onboarding program in this that it could check off they've done through this and it's set up and done. But is this overkill for that? Because, okay, so
No,
this is,
I think, and this is
Sarah,
why I'm
take
an
better notes.
advocate. Yeah. It's an efficiency tool. Once
Right.
you figure it out and it's intuitive enough to you, then you're onboarding people before they ever get there. You're also you can set it up so you're screening them in a sense, and that, you could have them create the course, before, which I think we heard yesterday about the screening, and, so that you could actually be active. You could be actively screening people, getting a good feel for them before they participate. So no, it's easy to set up. It's not hard. It's not a huge investment. You probably already got a lot of those resources there.
It's all the files and videos this year, this.
Yeah, and think if it can, so the two kind of, if you're starting out and you're on your own or you're a small organization, the two that I find, and I've looked at, surveyed, this is insane, but for a couple of consulting projects, I looked at over 100 LMSs that are out there, and some of them I only looked at for a few seconds to realize this isn't going to cut it. This isn't what we need. But Thinkific and Teachable are the two that are the most intuitive, easiest starts. And then you can migrate that content somewhere else later on if you want to, to a more robust and more expensive program. So I'll just ask if you could click on the managed learning products. And then if you could click on courses. This is how easy it is. And then if you could click online tools for agritourism, please. And so this is where you start. You basically, this is just a teaser framework that I set up for you so you could see what it looks like. Module sounds deadly. I was trying to think, can I do corral or something agricultural? But but just to make sure it's clear, we've got the modules. And then if you don't mind, let's see, clicking on add lesson under module 1. So this is exactly to the point you were saying. These are all the things you can add. And basically what you're doing in the background over time is you're creating your own resource library with all those videos, all those documents, everything, presentations, whatever it is you've got. You can embed Zoom links for meetings that you set up that are established. Then you can put the recordings of the Zoom meetings there. So it really is sort of dealing with this information waste kind of thing that this is making it more expedient, I think. And if you do it well, and you'll get better and better over time, it makes it a more meaningful, richer experience for these people. They can tap into it. They can go back to these things. And as you can see here, you can embed video, you do text, you can put a download of whatever it is you've got, multimedia that you've created, PDFs, audio. Audio is should not be neglected. And one of the things I found with graduate students, I did some sort of not very scientific testing, but I started giving them the written lectures, and then I started putting them in audio format and video format. And most of them gravitated toward the audio format. And because they can exercise, they could do housework, they could do whatever it was they needed to do, driving and listening. And then in a lot of cases, they would go back and they would read the stuff afterwards. So it was sort of their first blush intro, and then they would go back. So, remember, we're sticking things in our ears all the time at, inconvenient moments in a lot of cases to be online looking at this stuff. So, you can utilize that. You can, for example, if you wanted to make this a training module, you can do the quiz, you can monitor that they're going through it. They can't go further in some cases if you set it up until they've done the quiz. Assignments, you can do surveys at the end. You should always find out how people are responding and make sure you're kind of listening to what it is that they're bringing to it. So it just doesn't get much simpler than this. And just you play around with it, and maybe have some other folks log in the first time you do it, just so that they're seeing it from the other side. So Thinkific and Teachable are both very modest in cost. You can do Teachable, I think you can do one course for free. Thinkific might even be more than one course, and then you start paying and you get the add-ons, and they're still fairly modest in terms of their costs. So it's a nice starting point for you. Any questions about this? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So
Do you pay by course for like Thinkific and Teachable, or is it like a yearly subscription thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a yearly subscription or monthly. I think they both do it as monthly or as annual. Either one, obviously, with a little bit of a discount if you do the annual. And the basic for Thinkific, I want to say that they change the numbers all the time, kind of in what the costs are. But I think the basic was like $19 a month, something like that.
Fully integrated with Microsoft and Google applications?
Generally, I've had pretty, yeah. I'm just trying to think where we had any trouble. And yeah, generally everything has worked out really well in terms of the linkages. Trying to think back, and this was a couple of years ago, a course I was doing, which had 235 people from 26 countries in it. And that it was manageable. It worked out well. We didn't really run into issues with people there, 6 different continents. And it did the job. We paid, I think we paid one level up for that course to make sure we had these different integrations. That one was Thinkific. Yeah, so I've worked on a lot of different ones. I've worked on Moodle. I've worked on some that are out of business now. I haven't done much with Google Classroom, worked on Thinkific, worked on D2L Brightspace, and some others. So, and they're changing all the time. And I'm about to show you what I really like that's starting to come out more, because I think one person is doing Mighty Networks. And so we'll talk about that. So we'll jump back to the presentation if that's okay. Sorry to make you juggle that. Any other questions as we're clicking forward here? Okay, and then I'll go to the next. Did this turn off? The next slide. There we go. So there, and when I share this, these links will be there as well. So what I wanted to do is to point out kind of 2 different approaches. And Thinkific and Teachable, as I said, they're great starting points. There are others that are out there. They're just 2 that I've seen work really effectively for people. And so I'm not endorsing anything. I'm just saying I've seen these work. I know people can do this pretty intuitively. What I'm really getting excited about in terms of what's coming out is what Mighty Networks and Kajabi and several others are doing, where what they're trying to do. So if you're thinking about agritourism and you're really thinking about marketing your farm or a collection of farms, or you're really trying to sort of, kind of build the expertise that you have that's on farm or within your food system, then these actually have communities that go along with them. So you've got the courses, and then you've also got this community network. And I was saying, talking about Facebook groups and other things, sometimes those work for course creators. Sometimes their entire business is based on the Facebook groups that they create. Other people aren't comfortable with being there, on Facebook, and that goes up and down. And so this gives you the opportunity of creating that community of all the people that are following you. They may not be taking the courses, but they have the opportunity to start engage in your community. And part of, from the marketing side, if you're trying to kind of warm people up, then basically what you're trying to do is create this funnel where first you get them into, kind of your network. They start to appreciate your expertise. Maybe you give them just this even, 12-page PDF booklet for free, and then you get their email address. Then they start to come into your community. Then maybe you use something like Thinkific or Teachable, and you give them a free course, which basically turns into about 1 hour of content. Is one way of doing it. So they have a free course. And then you provide another offering that is a little bit higher dollar, more engagement. And then maybe you take it to the next level where, it's really a substantial kind of course, but also the agritourism experience comes as part and parcel of that. And maybe after that agritourism experience, they decide they want to learn more from you and go more in depth. And so then you've got the possibility of doing that. So I'm really excited about the courses in the community concept. It's a higher dollar proposition for sure. Mighty Networks, trying to remember what I last saw as a price there. Premium, do you remember?
If you do the community one, it's not so bad. It's only like $450
$100 a year.
Mhm.
But the full business one that has the courses and everything available is closer to 1,000.
Okay, yeah.
You can do them by. They're cheaper.
Mhm. Yeah, excuse me. Thank you. And Kajabi is one that I've run into. A lot of the solo entrepreneurs are using it now. And what you may like about Kajabi that I think is pretty compelling is you can basically you can build your website, build a community, build the courses, and it's all there. All of these are offering websites, kind of models. What Kajabi is trying to do is be the place, the one-stop shop for all of this, where you integrate it. So you're going to pay more, but it may be that it's more useful to have your website content, have your courses, have your community all there. And the thing I can assure you is that I think people like being in those closed communities where they feel like they're safe. They're not subject to all of the ads and other things that might come otherwise. So it's moving there. I'll offer a little bit of a critique. When I looked inside Mighty Networks with one of their representatives, probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, I didn't like the course structure as much as I did in some of these others. They were doing a better job at community than they were courses. And I think that's sort of what you've got to weigh. And Thinkific and Teachable haven't figured out the community thing in the way that Mighty Networks and Kajabi have. So you're sort of trying to balance this. So, it can be a fairly hefty investment, but what they all want to do is pull you in gradually. And so there are ways to do this incrementally. And then, just always keep your content in a separate file somewhere for yourself, so that if you decide to migrate, you can do that fairly easily. I think that's an important part of this. Let's see. So if we've got enough time to do this, and so we got about 15 minutes. Okay. All right. Perfect. I'd love, if you all are willing, just for everybody, just take a minute or two, kind of sketch out for yourself, what you think might work for you, what might be interesting. And then if we could divide into 3 groups quickly, just for people to share ideas they're thinking about, and then bring an idea back from each group that sounds really interesting, and we'll parse it out a little bit. Does that sound okay? All right. Great. That doesn't necessarily help the folks who are remote. I'm sorry, but hopefully the remote folks will be able to write down some ideas, and maybe we'll get something in the chat that might be helpful and interesting. Great. We'll give you just a moment to consider, and maybe just in terms of groups, and just sort of thinking, maybe if we could use this natural fault line we've got here, do one group there, and then maybe between you all, let's see, that would be, actually we'll go this way and catch everyone in the back. So, and then these folks, you all can put together. Great. We'll take about 5 minutes, and it takes a little bit longer. We'll do that and see what ideas you're thinking of and which one might be most interesting to pop out. Okay. Okay, good. Are there any questions or any points of view? Great. Maybe if you could try to pick up any ideas that haven't come across from anyone yet, we'll pull back in a minute. Okay. I'll give that a shot right now. Good, thank you. All right. Well, I hate to stop things, but do want to make sure we have a chance to get a little bit of feedback from each group. All right. That's great. And maybe we'll, if you like to stay comfortable kind of in your group as you are, feel free. And I think we can just pass the mic from group to group. And maybe if there's one idea that popped out there that seems particularly pertinent.
Oh, no.
All right, so the one that we mentioned is just, we talked about onboarding our employees and screening them and then using it to onboard them. It also, someone mentioned, it provides documentation. And then the interns over the summer can write their own videos for the next year's interns. So it's continuously being updated and improved upon.
That's awesome.
As long as they have nice things to say about us.
This
year they would not.
That's fantastic. I hadn't thought of that at all. Thank you.
So ours was kind of piggybacking off a whole grain pasta class we did recently at the farm. So we were going to keep it kind of simple, just thinking about, think if it looks really, really good, but oftentimes we don't have the resources at our businesses to kind of get that deep.
Yep.
But with all the other free tools you talked about, right? So we could preload the recipe in just a Google Drive PDF.
Yeah.
And also include some other links or PDFs, maybe that flip book or
Mhm.
flip snack. That sounded pretty cool.
Yeah.
Talk about the history of the grain, because we're really focusing on local grain growers as much as possible, how it's grown, organically, let's say. Talk about other grain growers in the region. There's the Northeast Grain Alliance, so there, give them more history, more regional information. And then also, if you take the class, you can get some videos preloaded also, just on YouTube, for example, to talk about some techniques, things like that. We talked about post-class, even if the class was okay with filming the original class,
Yep.
have share the video later. That could be, for free or maybe for a fee.
Yeah.
And then, a fun thing, while you're making the pasta, we could offer suggested playlists, music you want to hear.
There you
So that
go.
was one of our ideas.
I love it.
So some music to hear while you're either making pasta, music to enjoy while you're eating pasta afterwards, right? So that could be fun. And then we said definitely do an after class survey, like the Google Forms, let's say, and then also showcase other courses that are going to happen to the class, kind of for marketing purposes.
Awesome. Can we just stay here all day? Keep riffing. Yeah, these are great ideas. Super.
I heard something really exciting when you were talking, Lisa, just about people out there in the community who are ready to kind of mentor or share their gifts and what they've learned and their ideas and their expertise. And just making sure that there's a platform where that information can be shared globally is really, really exciting.
Great.
One thing I was mentioning with some experience with D2L is these are great, but you have to find a reason for the students to keep engaging with it. So if you do not invest your news or your events onto it, half the class shows up every day, the other half never logs in. So you have to find a reason to make everything on those systems. So they have to go every day to say, what's the news, what's happening? Because otherwise we have that information loss, right? Because you can track and say, okay, this side of the room is doing great. Where have you guys been? Right. And then you call them out and that's not good either. So you have to fully invest in the system or else it's not useful. So.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Thank you.
I was thinking about using the course tool for farm stay education, educating visitors that come to your farm. Not everybody is going to be comfortable or interested in touching cow udders and playing in mud puddles. But so this might be a nice alternative for folks who want to learn, but not get dirty.
That's great. Well, I got another.
we're just a whole bunch of educators back here, so we don't actually have farm experiences, but we were talking about the challenges associated with lack of internet access or cell service at some farms, and that if you do have online tools, like that can be a challenge, but having them available to download ahead of time
Yeah.
can also be a benefit for visitors who might only just be there for the afternoon. I was thinking about especially with like some smaller like classrooms and such, activities like Kahoot, which do like kind of like poll the room, might also be a way to one tool that wasn't mentioned that might engage younger digital natives in a fun way if they have cell phones available. Yeah.
Such good points.
Could I just throw this up really quick, because it is talking about the internet.
Mhm.
Internet connectivity is a big issue where we are rural. We got Starlink a year ago. If you've not heard of Starlink, and it's changed our lives. I mean, it's $100 a month. It's unlimited data. And it is about like 100 down, 10 up. I mean, it's for us, it's not fiber, but boy, it just to me solves and it's being rolled out globally. So it's just something that's there.
Yeah, we live a mile off the main road and have Starlink, and it's same. It's been a life changer.
Starlink. And
Elon
it's
Musk.
Elon Musk.
Not always a fan, but thank you for Starlink.
Yeah. And then the other one idea I had is we get asked so many times, like, tell us where else you could go. Like, and boy, just say, hey, here's a link, and he'll tell you like around the whole county.
Yeah.
The place that we love, right? And have a little thing about it. I mean, that would be wonderful.
And that's where a story map would be great. And there was something I was hearing back in the back, and I don't know if I misinterpreted, but it gave me either I just stole the idea completely or gave me an idea of, what if you created a sort of a constellation of farms in a given region, and each has a course. One does the grains, one does I think that's what I was maybe hearing back there. So is that right? Yeah. Do you want to say anything further? Is it? Yeah. That would be so awesome. I think it's brilliant. And that's where the South Tyrol has done such an amazing job, is valley by valley marketing. And so people who are there in the same region, they're competitors in some ways, of course, but they're collaborators, and all the marketing is done on or a lot of the marketing is done on a valley by valley basis. And so you're promoting everybody and sort of lifting it up. It's like increasing that shelf space. When I first heard about, cider starting in Vermont, and the first cider maker who was going commercial, he said, I want competition. I said, I don't understand why. He said, because that's how you get shelf space, and so now we look at the cider shelves, and it's a whole different deal 10 years later. So is there a way of really connecting this and doing it on a regional basis? And I just love the thing of highlighting the expertise from on the farm and not the top down.
A bigger tool like Mighty Networks. If you got 3-4 different organizations in on it, you get 3-4 different organizations that are going to partner, operations that are going to partner. It would allow you to divide up the expense of the tools as well.
That's a great point. Yeah. Well, I wish we could just hang for a while longer, but I hope we could continue the conversation. I mean, these are such great ideas, and I think, we've only scratched the surface. Culturally, as for the possibilities, and so I think it's really exciting. As long as we don't, still get people's feet messy and their hands in the ground. If we can find a way to do both and maximize that experience and give it the intellectual kind of power that really is there and behind it. Yes.
I just wanted to share that I work with farmers as a regulator, but for maybe a platform for operators to share and want to have a safe space like you're talking about, Mighty Networks, or I just was looking at Kajabi, is that it? So that way, something more closed, they're talking to each other when you're going to have an event. It's closed, only members can join, or you allow people in. So that way, if you did have operators who wanted to share things they didn't want public, or repeated, you know, they kind of got a confidentiality agreement, that might be, those would be good platforms, I would think.
That's a really good point.
One of the advantages of the Mighty Networks is you can set up groups within there. In the Mighty Networks, you can set up groups within there and you can have some of them be completely open. You can have some of them be closed. You can designate them and just give them all different names. And so that is one of the advantages of Mighty Network is it does allow you to set up those groups and you can set them as private or public or however you want to do it. So it's kind of a neat option.
On a larger scale, just offer an example from here in Vermont. My association is for the Vermont short-term rental community, which includes a subsect of farm stay hosts here in Vermont. And we are about to integrate a technology using a platform called TradeWing, which is more out of reach, I would assume, for an individual owner, but for an larger organization, one of the more affordable tools at about a $5,000 a year subscription. But it's very similar in that it has that Facebook-like private community forum that you can also create private groups within. So we'll have a farm host group versus a, you know, ski resort group or what all the different types of people in our community, but to give them a space. Thinking about too what exists maybe at a larger organization level in your area, they might be able to talk to them about creating a larger community forum for you all.
That's super. And I just, you know, the last comment I would make that I should have made earlier, most of these platforms that I provided you are what's called SCORM compliant, which provides accessibility to folks with visual or audio impairments of various sorts. And that's an important piece. And that also is another benefit, I think, you know, for those folks who, you know, also may have physical handicaps that prevent them from engaging in the same kind of way in some of the agritourism. This is another way of also bringing that, you know, to the table, bringing the table to them in some cases. So just really appreciate what you all are doing. Clearly, there's a good spirit of disruption, innovation, and can't wait to see what's next. So thank you.